Please be seated. All right, it's good to see all of you. Our scripture this morning is from a sermon in the New Testament, and that sermon is Apollo. It's not been established that he is the one, but that's who I attributed it to. And it's in Hebrews 12, 18 through 24. Here the writer of Hebrews, if it's Apollo or whoever, has become quite impassioned, quite inspired. And his text, his teaching, takes on that kind of inspired feeling. You know, you can almost sense the way he has become very animated and very powerful in his words. Hebrews 12, 18 through 24. He's been talking about the witnesses that we have in faith. He's been talking to a people that are discouraged. He's been talking to a people that whose experience as the church is undergone a lot of suffering, and in the process they have become disheartened. And this is what he says to motivate them, to inspire them, beginning with verse 18. You have not come to a mountain. Now here his reference is to Mount Sinai at first. And that's where the Ten Commandments were received. That's where Moses met God. That's where he ascended into the clouds and the people stayed on the plains. And they watched and they waited. And that's the mountain he's talking about here. You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm. That's what surrounded that mountain. To a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death. Oh, the fear and the terror about this mountain. It was sacred and holy ground, and it must not be touched. And here they're watching fire and thunder and clouds, and Moses has gone up there. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You've come to God, the judge of all, to the Spirit of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. What powerful, powerful words those are. Well, today, I chose that text because today's episode from Andy Griffith is called The Sermon Today. Andy and his family go to church. They have a guest preacher. He's all the way from New York. And this preacher, famous and a friend of their local pastor, faithful pastor of this church for all the years in Mayberry. And he's invited him down to be this guest preacher today. Let's watch this episode. There are a lot of directions to go with this episode, but I want to talk about sin. No. What else will we talk about? Well, today, when I was watching this, what grabbed me was the way everybody was falling asleep in the sermon. Of course, that would, be something I've never seen when I preach, but that's not, no, that's not true. That's happened to me a lot too. Every preacher has to find a way to deal with that. First time I went to a brand new church, Alan Fox was sitting there close to the front with his wife Hazel, and in fact, my wife and a couple of good friends were sitting on the same pew with him, and Ellen always fell asleep. Now, I would take this personally and wonder what I needed to do to improve my sermons, except the fact that the minute he sat down, Alan he was out. I mean, it was like, I haven't even started talking yet. What's wrong? I mean, why are you sleeping? Anyway, but that was him. I think he had a sleep disorder. That was what it was. It couldn't be my sermon. He had to have a sleep disorder. But Alan, sometimes when he started sleeping, he'd start snoring, like Gomer there. And it did at the very first time I can recall, because he started snoring away, and it was like, now what do I do? Well, Hazel, his wife, sitting next to him, goes like this, right in the ribs, just like whoever did with Gomer. And Alan, startled awake, but that particular Sunday, he thought the sermon was over, so he stood up to sing the final hymn right in the middle of it all. We just all laughed for a long time about that one. Because then he looked around and nobody else was standing, and he just kind of sunk back into his seat. Yeah. What is it? Well, one of the things I've noticed as watching this episode was the preacher's voice. Oh, the drawl, and that's going to put anybody to sleep. You can't assume that preacher's voice. So preachers are a large part of it, but what I thought most of all was, we have the greatest story ever told. This Bible is filled with things that have made great movies. It's filled with refugees, people out in the deserts, having escaped slavery. Now they're wandering around, waiting and hoping for a promised land that God is going to give them. It's a story of kings and wars and nations building. It's a story of people that are a part of every society across time, There are the weak, there are the strong, there are the powerful, there are the bullies, there are the prostitutes, there are the tax collectors, there are the sinners. People throughout this entire book are people that are just like us, and we certainly should relate to them. What is it about this story that somehow it's been tamed to the degree that we sit and we listen to it, and we wonder if there's anything new in it to be discovered? Maybe that's part of the issue. We've just heard it preached over and over again for so long. We're not sure there's any new message that's going to come to us. We're not sure if we're going to hear anything new. What do we come to church expecting? I don't know what's going on here, but do I need to do something, Marv? Maybe take it out of my pocket. Does that help?
Go for it.
Yeah, that did it. Okay. What do we come to church expecting? That some new thing is going to grab us today? Some new thing is going to come to us and we're going to see God or others in a new way? Do we come expecting to have an encounter with God, to meet God here in this place? To feel the presence of the Holy Spirit fill us so that our lives become more than what they are? It is only in the Spirit that we are raised up to become the people that God intends for us to be. Is that what we expect when we come to church? Maybe our expectations are at the very least just that we're going to come and see friends. We're going to get together and meet people that we haven't seen all week, and we're looking forward to that. But what do we expect about our encounter with God when we come? Is it going to be life-changing? And is it going to be awesome and inspiring? Is something going to happen to us when we come to church today? I mean, what do we expect? And can the church deliver? Oftentimes it does not, as we saw in this situation here. They dragged the hymn, they sang it slow. There's nothing inspiring in that. Like they had no heart in it. They were distracted by many things. Aunt B is concerned about what she's wearing. That's how the whole episode starts. She talks to Clara and was trying to decide whether she should wear earrings to church. We have a guest preacher. I just don't know what to wear. Well, it doesn't matter much, Well, I just think I want to, wear whatever's appropriate. And, well, he's from New York, Clara said. And Aunt B goes, yes. And I always imagine them wearing earrings. and that's her concern when she comes to church is my hat appropriate? Are my earrings appropriate? Do I look appropriate? So what she expected was to come and I guess maybe get some applause for having dressed in a stylish fashion and to be appropriate for church. I don't know what was in Aunt B's heart. I'm not going to guess, but it's obvious she's distracted from the beginning of the worship, looking at her friend's hat and kind of showing off her hat and wanting to have some kind of nod of recognition, agreement, and maybe of approval of some sort. Barney has a hard time staying up with things in the hymnal. He and Andy and Gomer, they all three begin to fall asleep. There's not much in this whole church service that I would find inviting and say, hey, I want to go back there, man. That was quite an experience, It just seems like a humdrum sort of occasion. What have we done? What have we done? We have the greatest story ever told. And I ask myself this. What have we done to it that it would become boring and in some cases irrelevant? For some people, that is. In 2025, Barna Group found that 75% of Christian America disagrees with, 79% of Christians disagree that church is boring and irrelevant. I'm glad for that. That's a pretty good majority of Christians, at least, that don't find church boring and irrelevant. But there's at least 20% of those who go to church that still find it as boring and irrelevant. And amongst the general population, the Barna Group found that 58% of those who never attend church and are non-believers find church is boring. And I have myself gone to church and found it boring, and I think I've had boring services. I find people getting restless, not paying attention, looking out the windows, being distracted by everyone who walks by. Go ahead, you can look out the window and be distracted by everyone who walks by. I'm not going to find fault with you for that or judge you for that. But what is it? What have we done with this? In the pages of the Bible, we do have the greatest story that's ever been told. It begins with Genesis, and that is the beginning of all things. And it goes all the way through to Revelation, and Revelation can hardly be considered boring. If it were a movie, it would really be a exciting sort of movie that would, I think, draw crowds. What have we done? How have we turned the greatest story ever told into something that hardly seems relevant in people's lives? Well, that's part of the problem. First, there's a lot of sitting still. We remember how it was, and do you remember how it was when you went to class and right after lunch, and you had to sit for a lecture? Maybe that was more in college. I couldn't tell whether early morning or after lunch were the worst times to have classes. I never decided for sure what was the case there. Because, you go early morning and you're just hardly awake, and you have to kind of get yourself alert and get into what the lecture or whatever the day is. And after lunch, you're sleepy from lunch, found it really hard to stay awake. So just sitting still and listening all the time is not all that effective in teaching, and it certainly isn't effective in church. I mean, if all we do is sit still and listen to me for, say, if I went on for an hour, you would all probably be going, okay, it's time to end this. Let's get on with it, sort of thing. It's that sitting still. And we don't have a high tolerance for that anymore. It's an ineffective education method. Pablo Pascala, in his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, called it an oppressive teaching, oppressive education pedagogy, an oppressive education system, because he called it the banking method. That is, I got all the knowledge, and you're going to sit and listen, and I'm like acting like all I got to do is kind of maybe unscrew your heads, pour in my knowledge, screw your heads back on, and that's it. You go out and you've absorbed everything that I've said today. Does it work that way? It doesn't work in school. And he revolutionized education in Brazil with his new methods of pedagogy. And some of them were adopted in American schools. Not all. But most students today find school, at least in part, to be oppressive. It takes time out of your day. You're here. You're thinking about all this stuff maybe you need to do today yet. Some of you may go back to work tomorrow and you think, well, what have I got to get done for work tomorrow? Or you have other things that are going on today. You think about what you need to do to be ready for those. We have to take this time out of our day, and we're not sure always that it's worth it. We may be disinterested in the lessons. I mean, how much do you connect with the writer of Hebrews and the story that he is telling to his church? And of course, I've already mentioned that church services are in the a.m., which is not always the best time. I mean, I don't wake up till noon. But anyway, I don't know if that's true for you or not. We may find the lessons irrelevant. We may feel like we're self-sufficient. That's one of the greatest problems with Generation Z. They don't feel the need to go to church. And I've told you before about this one who I was sitting and visiting with who told me, I went to church till I was 18. I learned all the lessons I needed to learn. In other words, something happened at 18. He graduated from needing to go to church. I don't need to go to church to be reminded again and again what my moral responsibilities are. I know them. And I just go out and live the life I'm supposed to live. That's what it's all about. And you don't need the church. No, I don't need the church. We're self-sufficient. Well, I mentioned the preacher could be boring. I know you don't have that problem here. But anyway, the preacher could be boring. Some of it may be resistance to being told what to do. Who of us in this part of the United States likes to be told what to do? We are independent individualists who are self-sufficient. I don't need to be told what to do. And if the subject is always sin, we're always being told how inadequate we are. Who likes to hear that message over and over again about ourselves? Oh, I got something wrong with me. I'm just going to go to church so they can beat up on my self-esteem and make me feel like I'm less than I need to be all the time. Service can be boring. The music can be draggy. We went through long periods of time with funereal types of services. The organ would play and the hymns would be sung, but they were the kind of thing that you might hear at a funeral. And people, with the organ, the organist would invariably, and this happened a lot in churches when I began ministry, the organist would say, well, you got to play it slow to keep everybody together. And the hymns would drag terribly. And the music wasn't all that interesting. And then, there's just things that we hear on a Sunday that just are difficult to understand. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons the church may be considered boring, irrelevant, and untrue. It's not common, it's not new to us. Today in Matthew 15:8, Jesus says, this people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far away from me. Their worship of me is empty, since they teach instructions that are human rules. I had a problem with worship at that point. We're losing the world. And that's the bad news for today, and I'm not going to dwell on it. But it's hard to get people to church like it once used to be. Thank God, in some ways, for COVID time, because we learned how to do church online. And people like that. They can sit at home, drink their coffee, tune in when they want to, get up and go do other things if they want to. I'm not saying any of you online today, I'm not saying you do that, but you can. And some people do prefer to come to church online rather than to come to church in person. And Brian Bantam, in his book, My Home with the Baptists, where he's rediscovering his Baptist heritage and connection, says, the crisis of contemporary Christianity, can it convey a credible sense that God is present and moves in our lives? It's my deepest desire for us when we come to church. We come with the expectation that we're going to encounter God. We're going to see where he's been moving in our lives. We're going to feel the powerful presence of his holiness. We're going to sense in that powerful presence of his holiness the overwhelming nature of the spiritual and the divine. We're going to understand that there's something bigger than us. And that's going to move us. Do I tell stories that may leave you crying at the end of the worship service? Do I need to make sure that my sermons are basically just stories, one story after another, so that you'll stay involved and stay engaged? We love stories. We'll go to movies and see movies, set through 2 and 3 hour movies. The Odyssey, by the way, is 3 hours. We'll set through that. If you read Homer's Odyssey, will you sit for 3 hours and read it straight through? No, but you go to the new movie, The Odyssey, and it's a whole different story. It's like sights and sounds, incredible kinds of sights and sounds. The music was loud. One of the problems I had with it, dialogue was soft and the music was loud. Why was the music more important than the dialogue? The dialogue was telling the story. But music also tells the story. You can hear when the notes of the music become something that suggests, something bad's about to happen. That's how we use music. Can we do that at church? There are those big churches that do that. And I attended a conference on that with people from a lot of mega churches. One of them was a Christian church in Denver, South Suburban, huge mega church. And their worship leader was there. And so was their associate pastor. And we had a lot of time to visit and talk. Pretty big conference. One night, maybe because we had stopped off and had a drink or two before we returned to our rooms, but the worship pastor of the South Suburban Church, who was a musician, played with a band. And we were talking about worship. And then in a moment where he revealed what was really in his heart, just a moment when he opened up and was very vulnerable, said, I get so tired of and he used the word effing, performance. It's just a performance. I don't know why I'm doing it anymore. Well, I understood that. Some mega churches, that's exactly what it seems like. They're just putting on a concert, a performance. But that's what engages people. That's what keeps them coming back. That's what fills their pews and builds these mega churches, they'll say. I'm not sure that is all the case, but there's a point to be made there. Is that how we do it? Is that what we need to do? Is we need to do what movie magic does, Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, so that people can stay engaged with the Word, they can hear the Word, they can receive the Word, in order that they would be transformed. What does all of that kind of movie-making performance in churches do to change people's lives? Does it make us feel like we've had a real encounter with God? What do we need to do to get back the awe, the wonder, the incredible sense of how powerful this story is? How do we do that? How do we have that sense of awe? And the Tuesday at the Men's Bible, I was kind of giving a preview of the sermon. And I wanted to, the text was an awe-inspiring kind of text. But it's difficult for us to see that because it seems like a word from an ancient time, and we don't always connect with it. And it's really hard to see in some of the words how awe-inspiring it is, what is being said, or what is happening. How do we get there? How do we get engaged again in the Scriptures so that it is life-changing? Our story is awesome. Our story is awesome, and I recognized that recently when reading Rob Bell's book. It's all about spirituality. Excellent book, excellent book. And in this book, he starts talking about creation. Now, we've talked to our kids about creation, and somehow we've taken this creation story and really reduced it down to nothing. God stepped out into space and said, "Let there be light." There was nothing, and God spoke, and there was something. Well, is that really how? Is that a scientific explanation? That's one of the questions I'm often asked. You can't bring faith and science together. Somehow they're at opposites with one another. They're in disagreement with each other, and I totally do not accept that premise. Faith and science are not enemies of one another. Scientific materialism is not a worldview that Christians should have. And I will acknowledge that. In fact, that's constantly been my position on it. Scientific materialism is the faith, the philosophy that there's nothing except this material world. All we have is mass. Well, what is it that science studies? It studies mass. What is mass? What is this stuff? Flesh, bones, rocks, floors, chairs, whatever. What is mass? And that's what science studies. But the conclusion that only material things exist and nothing beyond this world can be proven or established. That philosophy is what is not of faith. But faith and science are not natural enemies of one another. Up through the time of Isaac Newton, the world was explained as created by God with laws that were established, an order that was designed so that you and I can live within an orderly, designed, perfect sort of world if we would just, follow the rules, sort of thing. Faith and science didn't grow apart until the 1800s. And I'm sorry it did. There's so much in science, especially now. We got to give credit to Einstein for this. He is the one that brought in quantum physics, and quantum physics and faith are very close together. He imagines a whole world that we cannot see. Do you know that this world is the subparticle world? Things that are smaller than atoms, we can't even see atoms. Things that are smaller than atoms, and they're called fermions and bosons and quarks and all those kinds of things. They each have their own purpose. They're different things. Fermions are the creators of mass. Bosons are the thing that structures mass and puts it all together, and they're all divided in different other subparticles. And I'm saying, okay, well, where can I see all these subparticles? Well, you can't. Why not? Because it can't be seen. They're way, way too small. Even atoms, you can't see atoms. But these, we're told, are the basic building blocks of the universe. Quantum physics asks us to believe in a world that we cannot see. Does that sound familiar to you? Quantum physics asks us to believe in a world that we cannot see. Sounds vaguely familiar. Moreover, quantum physics has established in all of our thinking, and it's taught in schools, that time and space are relevant. And that statement repeated over and over because it comes from Einstein's theories of general relativity. Time and space are created things, and space is matter. I can't get that one. I don't understand that one at all. I know how I move through the air. You tell me that that's mass. Then how would I move through it? You know, it gets heavy sometimes as fog, and we have difficulty seeing, but still it's able to drive through fog, walk through fog, do all those sorts of things. You tell me that that's mass out there, and I don't know how we would travel in it. Space is mass. It's mass. Einstein compared it to a large sheet. If it's a sheet, how do planets move? How do spaceships fly in outer space? It's like you're telling me that we go through walls. How does that work? The whole thing that science tells me is something that is awe-inspiring because I start asking questions. I'm saying, how is that possible? I can't see that. That's it. But you're telling me about a world that I cannot see or understand, and somehow I'm engaged. I get up here and tell you about a world that you cannot understand and is long since beyond sight, and we're not engaged. How did that happen? Science, faith. Well, they're just really close together, and if we deny one for the other, we're going to lose, and we're losing us. Not just the people out there in the world, you know. When it says that God stepped out in space and said that there would be light, science tells us the first thing that happened after the Big Bang was the creation of light. When it says in Genesis 2 that God stooped down and picked up a handful of dust and created the first living human being, you may say, others say, that's poetry. That's not science. That's not fact. But what is it that science tells us? It tells us that you and I are all stardust. We're all made out of the same things that created the planets and the stars, stardust. So when Genesis, in its pre-scientific understanding, says God stooped down to the ground, picked up a handful of dust, and made a living human being, it's closer to science than it is to fantasy or myth. That's precisely what happened. We have been created out of the same things that everything else is created out of. Man, oh, okay. We hear that and we go on. Let's stop and ask some questions. What does that mean? What I liked about Rob Bell's book, he talks about how the very first thing that happened after the world was created, after the universe was created in the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. Yes, 6 days is poetry. I think science is far more accurate in suggesting 13.8 billion years ago. And we don't have to just say, well, one's one. You know, there are two sets of facts and we can't make them agree, we can't come together on them. Rob Bell says the very first thing happened, and that's because he's going on the basis of quantum physics, is all these little particles that no one can see. You know what they started doing? They started attaching to one another. Protons, electrons, and neutrons of an atom's orbits are all made of these little particles. And what I never knew before, but I've now learned, is that an atom is mostly space. Inside of this tiny atom, there's infinite space. Has to be. Or protons, electrons, and neutrons would crash into each other. And that's what we make them do. That's how we split. An atom, we make them crash into each other across that vast distance of space. You mean something so small that I cannot see it has so much space? As science suggests, really? Has all this, it's more space than anything else. Empty space. But a lot's going on there. What happened was particles started forming atoms, attachment. The very first thing that happened with the Big Bang was that those things that came out of it started forming relationships. Particles formed atoms. Atoms, after a while, formed molecules. Molecules formed cells. And cells became things. Relationship is at the very heart of the beginning of the universe and all the way through. But here's another thing about all of that that I started asking them. So if I'm made out of the same kind of stuff that a rock is made of, how come I'm a rock? I'm not a rock, I mean, I am a living human being. Lynn and I replanted some stuff yesterday. And as we were doing it, I thought about how these plants, they feed on soil. I'm not a dirt eater. I've eaten dirt, but I'm not a dirt eater. I eat the tomatoes that have been formed from the soil that came from the stars. How come? How did all of those particles and atoms and molecules end up creating human beings like us instead of rocks? And how come we don't eat dirt? We eat delicious, fresh, sweet corn and tomatoes and cucumbers and squashes, all these wonderful summer foods. We eat all these delicious, wonderful things. How did that happen? And who decided that that was going to happen? Who decided that a particle joined to an atom, joined to a molecule, and then creating a cell would end up creating all of these incredible, diverse things in the universe? And if we don't pause and wonder about all of this, then our soul may be a little dead. That's what we have to do, awaken ourselves each day to the wonder of life, the mystery of life itself. And you're saying, but there are no answers. No, there really aren't any answers that satisfy completely. But mystery itself is an awe-inspiring thing. Let mystery be the significance of it, the depth of it. Let mystery itself grab a hold of our hearts and our minds and our souls. Don't need to have answers. Some of it is just praising God for the mystery of life itself, the mystery of me, my being, my being. I don't understand that. Suppose I'd stayed in Oklahoma after seminary, never come to Nebraska, never met Linda. We didn't have the kids we have or the grandkids that we have. Do you ever spend any time thinking about, if I had not met this person, my life would have been completely different? How was it I met this person, had this life? Did I design that? Or did I just take love day by day by day, and I just got moved in directions, not always with my sense that someone was directing all of that? I need to get back in touch with the fact that my life itself is a mystery, and that's the most important thing that we can come alive to when we come to church. Our lives themselves are a mystery. And what a wonderful, wonderful mystery it is. Let your mind explode with all these wonderful thoughts. It's better than the Odyssey and all its special effects, or Star Wars and all its special effects. We try to create with movie magic that sense of awe and wonder. But all we have to do is spend time in our head trying to understand who we are, where we came from, why we're here, and where we're going. And I promise you that that will awaken something new and fresh in you. That's what happened after I was reading Rob's explanation of it. That is, that these little tiny particles that no one can ever see and no one can prove exist are the building blocks of so much But how is it that it ends up being me and not a rock? No, I'm not a rock. I was watching a special on seeds. These little tiny seeds that we put into the ground have the DNA, in their DNA, have the blueprint for whatever they become. A corn seed, when planted, gives us corn. You're saying, well, duh. Isn't that an obvious fact? Is it all that obvious? Is it all that obvious? How come when I plant a corn seed, I don't get roses? Well, sometimes, but that's my fault. How come? Why is that? Who designed all this? Do you know 90% of our body is water? We have every single thing inside of us that's inside of a rock. And yet we're not rocks. We're human beings. We're made up of the same thing. It's called stardust. Oh man, I want to come alive to that. And that, I think, is the very thing that can enliven our worship and our time together. That's why we're here on Sunday. We're not here to show off our new hat. People don't wear hats to worship anymore. We're not here to show off our new earrings. We're not here to show off our new suit as men. We're not here to, enforce the rules. All that church service was about the rules. You sit still, you do not fall asleep. What we didn't see was Opie trying to chase a fly with his eyes and his dad telling him to sit still. We really didn't see that part. That's what church becomes for so many. It's about all the rules and the proper conduct. You don't move. When I was a kid and I was sitting by my father and I was very young, and if I moved during the sermon, I got a hand on my knee telling me, do not move. I wanted to crawl under the pews. I wanted to get down into those pews and crawl all the way to the back of the church. I wanted to sit up in the balcony where I could do whatever I wanted, and I wasn't so restricted. The church is not about enforcing all those rules. We say move around. Why not? That's what it means for us to be human, If you want to get up and do something else during my sermon, I won't be offended. Let's just do that, If your thoughts wander far away from what I'm preaching because of something I'm said, then I'm honored, Don't think that there are rules that we have to conform to as we sit in the pews in church or in the chairs in church. And if we don't follow those rules, somebody's going to judge us. Everybody's watching us. No, everybody's not watching us, church. That loss of a sense of freedom is an important part of what is so often is rejected about the church. Nobody wants to be told what to do. Well, yeah, no, we don't. We don't want to be confined, restricted. There were rules. Andy looks at Barney and says, sin. That's what that look he gave Barney was, Barney, you said the wrong thing. And if her friend had not turned and admired Amby's hat, she might have thought she wore the wrong thing. We passed that time where you had to wear the right things to church. When I was a kid, everybody had to dress up in a suit. We had to at least have a shirt and tie to come to church. And boy, the deacons, there were 12 of them, men, across the front of the church that would deliver communion. We were a huge church. And all of them had to be wearing suits and ties and white shirts, not colored shirts. I remember colored shirts came along, and the church wondered if that would be appropriate to wear to worship, whether or not the deacons could be wearing colored shirts and serving as deacons, We majored in the trivial things and minored in the things that were really important. That sense of the awesome presence of God in our midst. God is here. God is doing something. God is going to do something in your life today. God is going to touch you in a very special way. Because you were created in His image, you exist for His pleasure and for His love. You are redeemed by his Son, and you will inherit eternal life. One of the greatest stories ever told. How can that become boring and irrelevant? Because we will spend eternity in the presence of a God that often the world just will not recognize. It's time to come alive again. Frank Sean wrote in his book about it, there's nothing in us that is not also in the earth, the sun, the stars, and everything composed of matter. What a wonderful thing that is. You mean this Mike and I have some things in common? Really? That's just metal. Huh. I don't know how that is. Do you? Why not feast on that when you come to church? The things we don't know, the mysteries that are too big. Now we know in parts, but also feast on this. But someday we will know completely. And what a wonderful thing that's going to be.